Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa balanced news in public affairs, education, music and information gamit ang mga bagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Mag-ipon na rin endorsement. FTC. Uy, ano yung kumusta ka ini? Sabi ko kaya matipis siya sa pagkakaan. Sarala pagkakaan ano pa yan ha? Ano yan? Sabi? Sabi yun.
Mga kaibigan, mula po naman dito sa Quezon City, makakapanayan po natin ang isang dalubhasa, isa pong microbiologist at isang moral theologian. Siya po ang naging resource person ng Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines sa kanilang plenary assembly at napag-usapan ang tungkol sa pagbabakuna at ba ang kahalagahan nito. I'm referring to the Godfather Nicanor Austriaco, a Dominican missionary. We have something in common. I was being recruited by Father Ray Adalid to become a Dominican during my high school days. Pero si Father Nick, ang nagbinyag pala sa kanya ay si Father Ray Adalid ng UST. So I'm happy to have him with us today. Siya po ay isang Filipino-American molecular biologist at isang Catholic priest, isang professor of biology and professor ng theology sa Providence College sa Rhode Island sa Estados Unidos. For those interested to find out, siya po ay dumalo, nag-aral sa University of Pennsylvania. Meron po siyang degree, Bachelor of Science in Engineering, summa cum laude noong 1989. Nagkaroon din po ng PhD in Biology mula sa MIT. Ito po yung Massachusetts Institute of Technology noong 1996. At siya po yung naging Harvard U Medical Institute pre-doctoral fellow sa laboratorio ni Professor Leonard Gerente. At ang kanyang doctoral research involved the characterization of the first aging genes in budding yeast. Pero masyadong scientific na, masyadong technical. Padre Nick, magandang araw sa inyo. Magandang gabi dyan sa Estados Unidos.
Hello, thank you for having me on your show.
I'm happy to have you with us because the bishops, particularly si Archbishop Valles, pagkatapos si Bishop Ambo David, talked very highly of you at nabanggit yung inyong naging sharing tungkol sa bakuna, ano bang background para sa karaniwang mamamayan sa ating coffee chat dito sa ating panayam ngayon. Ano po ba ito? Tell us more.
So the Archbishop and the Bishop were very gracious. I gave them a 20-minute presentation on the vaccines, and then we had probably another 45 minutes of conversation where they asked me questions about the vaccines, and I responded to them. So in terms of the vaccines, what I wanted to inform the bishops is that the vaccine rollout in the Philippines, our desire to vaccinate 70 million Filipinos is going to be an enormous challenge because there are so many Filipinos in 7,000 islands, and most of them are going to be vaccinated twice in 1 month. So we went through the science so that the bishops would understand what a vaccine does. I also went through the different vaccines, the Western vaccines, the Chinese vaccines, the Russian vaccines, and we talked about the ethical questions raised by the vaccines. And finally, we talked about how the Catholic Church can contribute to the success of the vaccine program in the Philippines.
Mhm.
Ano pa na
In
yun?
a capsule, Father, in a capsule, ano itong
Ibayin namin sa
bakunang
inyo,
ito?
ano?
Paano ito tumutugon sa COVID-19?
So
Ano sa Europe?
what happens is that in order to destroy
In a
COVID-19,
year,
you have to have antibodies against COVID-19. And so the vaccine introduces a small part of the virus called the spike protein, and they inject that into you, and then your body recognizes that and makes antibodies. So that when you really get infected, then the antibodies that you have made will destroy the virus and you will not get sick.
Okay. Pero gaano katagal makadevelop ng bakuna ang mga siyentipiko?
So it's actually not dependent upon time. It's dependent upon how many people you can test. So if you're making a vaccine against a very rare illness, it can take 10 years to develop the vaccine because there are so few people who get sick. But COVID-19 is pandemia, di ba? So there were tens of millions of people who are getting sick around the world. So it's easier to develop a vaccine when you have tens of millions of people getting sick, and you also have billions of dollars being given to you by governments to make the vaccine. So what would normally take maybe 5 to 10 years, we were able to do, thanks be to God, in about 1 year.
Okay. Pero kailangan daw po ng ilang klase o hiwa-hiwalay na pagsubok sa tao at kailangan din malaman kung aangkop ba sa lahi. Ano po ang katotohanan dito?
So, vaccines are tested. So there are different clinical trials that the vaccine has to pass through. So for the vaccine is tested for how good it prevents getting sick. The vaccine is also tested to see if there are any side effects. So this morning, I was vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine here in the United States. So my arm is still feeling a little bit sore. And so it will be sore for another 2 days or so. But we know that the vaccines that will be used in the Philippines, for the most part, will prevent severe COVID-19.
Okay. Pero katulad po niyan dito sa Pilipinas, hinihintay ang pagsabayo ng Food and Drug Administration tungkol sa mga bakunang nagpapanukala na nagamit sa Pilipinas. Pero nabanggit din ni Ambassador Chito Santaromana na hinihintay pa rin sa China yung phase 3 ng pagsubok sa gawang China ng mga bakuna. Can you please enlighten us on the phases involved in the tests?
Okay, so there are 4 phases to make a vaccine. The first is called preclinical trial, which is where you make the vaccine in your lab and you test it on animals. Then phase 1 is to test the vaccine in maybe 20 people to see if the vaccine is safe. Phase 2, maybe 100 people, and you are testing to see how much must you give in the patient to get an immune response. And then phase 3 is tens of thousands of people. You want to see if it is safe and it's effective. So we are still waiting. So Sinopharm and Sinovac, the two Chinese vaccines, some partial data has been released, but we are still waiting for the official results from the phase 3 clinical trials, especially of Sinovac, because the Philippines is going to be getting Sinovac and Sinopharm vaccines in the next few months.
Okay. Pero katulad po niyan, yung Moderna, yung Pfizer at iba pa, may mga pagsubok na at tinatanggap na. Sa Europa, ang issue ngayon ay tila mababalam ang paglalabas ng AstraZeneca sapagkat may problema sila sa produksyon. The same problems in a developing country like the Philippines.
So the present challenge we have in the Philippines is supply is so limited, right? So This is why the Western vaccines, 80% of the Western vaccines were bought by basically 5 groups: the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, France, and Canada. So they bought 80% of the Western vaccines. So all the 180 so other countries have to wait for other sources. And the other sources are China, Russia, and some say India as well. So will we have problems with supply? Well, we are already having problems with supply. So we are not, Secretary Galvez has done a great job going around and talking to different manufacturers to obtain whatever he can. So what will happen in the Philippines is we will have a combination of vaccines from all over the world, from different companies, from different countries, in order to vaccinate our 70, 75 million citizens.
I see. Pero paano po ito? Ano ang prioridad rito sa inyo po bang karanasan dyan sa Estados Unidos? Lalo ba yung frontline workers o yung mga sundalo? Ano po ang karanasan ninyo?
So the World Health Organization has actually set up this priority list. So the priority list is frontline health workers. And then in the second, usually you have senior citizens. Now in the Philippines, unlike here, the government has prioritized the poor. So the poor indigent senior citizen will receive the vaccine before other senior citizens. And in category 3, we are going to vaccinate all the indigent, all 12% of the Filipino population that is poor. This is not, in the United States, the poor do not have priority. And I am grateful that in the Philippines, we are in fact watching out and caring for the poor because they are most vulnerable and they are most at risk during the pandemic.
Very well. But the question is, kailangan ng facilities. Nabanggit po doon sa mga briefing sa Malacanang na yung mga bakuna ay kailangang maging mabisa kung mayroong storage. Ano po bang karanasan ninyo sa Estados Unidos? What would you say?
So there, so I just arrived here in the States and I will go back to the Philippines in 1 month. Because in the Philippines, we will struggle with refrigerators because many of these many of these vaccines require very cold temperatures. So the Pfizer vaccine requires a refrigerator that is colder than winter in Antarctica. So Antarctica in the South Pole, -70 degrees. So we do not have that many of those refrigerators in the Philippines. But the Philippines is trying to get vaccines that do not need these very cold refrigerators. So, for example, AstraZeneca and now Novavax, which released its clinical data yesterday, these vaccines can be kept in a regular refrigerator, like the refrigerator you have in your house.
Really? So that's a blessing. Mabuti po kung ganun. Pero katulad niyan, yung pricing, would you know the price range of these vaccines?
So there are list prices that were published, but it is clear that each government is paying a different price for the vaccines depending upon how many vaccines you're having and how much you can afford. So for example, the list price for, I think, Sinopharm or Sinovac was like 3,000 pesos per Filipino. But Secretary Galvez is pointing out that it's probably around 600 to 700 pesos. And he cannot reveal the exact number because different countries cannot talk about the pricing that they got when they were negotiating with the vaccine company.
I see. So there's really this confidentiality clause. Okay. Coming from a microbiologist's perspective, gaano katagal bago maramdaman ang epekto ng bakuna? Katulad ko kasi, I'm already a senior citizen and the vaccines I received in public school during the 60s, ito na yung kombinasyon. May BCG at iba pa, all rolled into one. Father, ano po ang inyong maibabahagi?
So Moderna, for example, let's talk about Moderna. So Moderna vaccine, if you were vaccinated today, 2 weeks from now, you would be 80% protected against COVID-19. And then 1 month from today, you would take your second dose, your booster shot, and 2 weeks after that, you would be protected from COVID-19, 95% efficaciousness.
And for how long will that be?
We do not know that because the vaccines have only been rolling out around the world this past month. But we expect for maybe 1 to 2 years, and then you would have to be vaccinated again. This is common for respiratory illnesses like the flu. So if you get the flu, you have in the United States, you have to get your flu shot every year, every November. So it could be something similar to that.
I see. Pero aside from Moderna, yung Pfizer, what do you know about Pfizer?
So Pfizer is similar as well. So after 2 weeks, you will get something like 70% efficacy. 2 weeks after the second dose, again, 95%. So each vaccine has its own different effectiveness schedule. So when you ask me, when will I be protected? It will depend upon which vaccine you got.
Really? Okay. What about senior citizens with other concerns? May sakit sa puso, may high blood, may diabetes. Ano po?
So the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were tested with senior citizens, and there was no adverse bad effects for the senior citizens. So for senior citizens, even those who have diabetes or high blood or something like that, the vaccines will still be helpful for them. Now, there was a report in Norway that the Pfizer vaccine, when given to very, very sick elderly people. So if you are already very sick from something else and you are very fragile, there was a concern that maybe your body could not take the stress of taking the vaccine, which is why we need to be vaccinated. All the young people have to be vaccinated to protect the elderly who cannot be vaccinated.
I see. But the demographics in the Philippines will tell us that majority of the Filipinos now are below 25 years old.
So the median age for Philippines is 24, which means that 50% are 24 and below.
24 to 85?
And 35% of Filipinos are 17 or below. And which means that in order for us to vaccinate the 70 million, the 70%, we pretty much have to vaccinate every adult Filipino and Filipina. Because the vaccine is not approved yet for children. So until it's approved, we have to vaccinate everybody else. And that's one of the things I explained to the bishops, which is why this is all of us together have to work together because everyone has to be vaccinated.
I see. Ano po yung naging reaksyon ng karamihan ng mga obispo? How did they take the information?
Well, I think the bishops, just like most people, are trying to understand, the science, the ethics, the challenges of vaccination. But we had very good questions about, the date. How do you transport vaccines? How about for a diocese in Mindanao that does not have many cases of COVID? What are the who will get vaccines first? These were the kind of questions they had for me.
I see. Pero doon po sa ginawang press briefing kamakalawa, nabanggit ng mga obispo na dumalo sa plenaryo na kung kakailanganin, bubuksan nila ang mga simbahan at iba pang pasilidad para magamit sa pagbabakuna. Napag-usapan po ninyo ito, ano?
Yes, we did. Because I explained to them that many Filipinos are worried about going to the hospital, because if they go to the hospital, they're worried they will get COVID. So LGUs are looking for places to set up vaccination sites. So we can have high schools, elementary schools, and I propose to the bishops as well that our churches, especially our larger churches, could be used as vaccination sites, especially since many people will feel safe going to a church as long as there's social distancing and mask wearing.
Okay. Maganda po yan. At welcome naman ng Malacanang yung gesture na yan ng mga obispo. I brought it up to Secretary Harry Roque in a briefing just the other day. But let me ask you, there are also countries doing their research sa bakuna. Thailand and India are reported to have it. Kakayanin kaya ng Pilipinas makagawa ng bakuna?
So I am actually in the United States for a month because I am developing a vaccine for the Philippines. So I'm a yeast molecular biologist. And so one of the things we are doing here in the United States this month is to use a yeast platform to develop a COVID-19 vaccine for the Philippines. So I hope to return to the Philippines in a month, and we will test the vaccine at the University at Santo Tomas, sa UST. And if it works in animals, then we can try to see whether or not we can develop that vaccine for the Filipino people.
Do we have the facilities?
Well, for the vaccine that I am developing, I have the facilities here in the United States for the initial molecular steps. And then we are setting up a laboratory at UST that will have the facilities for us to do the testing of that vaccine in the Philippines. With regards to if those work, then I would have to apply to the FDA in order to see whether or not we can undertake clinical trials in the Philippines to test this Filipino vaccine.
Okay, very good. Now, this may be a bit ticklish, Father. How much are you spending for your research? Do you get support from the government or from other agencies?
Not right now. I mean, one of the things I have learned is that it is better to have my own support because we can do science faster if I'm not writing grants and I'm not writing reports. And God has provided my laboratory with enough funding for us to get this project started. And we have enough funding to test the vaccine in animals. So I can remain independent until the point. If it works, you know, I told the Lord that I will do the best science that I can do, but He has to take care of everything else.
Yes, of course. And there's the saying, where God guides, He provides. How different is your vaccine, your materials from the other vaccines now in the market?
So this would be a novel yeast vaccine platform. So this is the basic idea. It's a crazy idea, but it's actually scientifically possible. There is a human probiotic yeast that is approved for human consumption. You can actually buy it at Watson's already. So you for health in their stomach. And so what we're doing in my laboratory here in the US is we are taking a part of the COVID-19 virus and putting it into that yeast. So what will happen if it works is we would allow this yeast to grow. You would add the yeast to your milk, and then you would just drink it. There's no injection, no doctor, no nurse. You will drink it at home, and you will that will vaccinate you. It's an oral vaccine. And so it does not have to be put in a refrigerator. So we would make it in packets, and then you would go to Watson's or Mercury Drug, and you would just buy it. And we were, it's relatively cheap. You could buy it for something like 10 pesos, and then you would just consume it in your milk. This is my dream, and this is the prayer. But again, I will just work hard, and the Lord will have to provide.
Yeah, Father, this may be another crazy question, but because yeast is also a material used in beer, Can I just take it sa sirbesa na lang?
Oh, in fact, my students want to take it in their beer.
Uh, so po pwede.
Oh yeah, you can put it in milk, you can put it in water, basically. And we have factories in the Philippines that make yeast for factories, and I will say, can you stop production of your yeast for a week, and you will grow our yeast, and then you will produce this yeast for the Philippines, and then we will package it and send it around the country. It's a crazy idea, but the Filipino people are worth the experiment.
Aha. At hindi naman siguro gasinong kontrobersyal ang pagsubok nito because there is this mistrust in the vaccines caused by the dengue-vaxia something.
In 2017, the dengue vaccine, when it was rolled out in the Philippines, it led to severe illness and even death for several children. So it's not surprisingly significant number of Filipinos are very wary of vaccines. My hope is that an oral vaccine is less scary because there's no injection. All you have to do is you have to drink it. But this is one of the reasons why I'm back in the States to try to finish the work here to bring it to the Philippines.
I see. What's your timeline, Father, if I'm not being too insistent?
It will hopefully, to get a little technical, we are making the yeast now. So in fact, yesterday, scientists in my lab did the first steps to make the yeast. It will probably, if God blesses our work, about a month and a half, we will have it ready. And then I have to fly it back to the Philippines, go into quarantine, of course, and get tested multiple times, and then go to UST. And then we will have to start the animal testing. Animal testing will take several months. And then only after then would we know if it works. And if it works, then I have to write an application to the Philippine government to apply for clinical tests, clinical trials.
Yeah, you will also have this patented, of course.
I guess so. I mean, I am a consecrated man. I'm a religious, so I have a vow of poverty. So probably, the Dominican order will patent it.
Yes, of course. How different is this from the vaccines being developed in India, in Thailand, and other countries?
This is the first. This would be completely different because it's yeast-based, and I do not know of anyone else in the world who's developing a yeast platform for the COVID-19 vaccine. But we'll try. There's enough good science that shows it is reasonable to think it will work. But we just have to do it. We have to see if it does work.
Opo, isang concern ng mga obispo tungkol doon sa pinagmulan ng ginagamit.
I'm sorry, but you're breaking up.
Ano po ba ito? Meron daw mga placenta? Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Father,
but you were breaking up. Can you repeat your question? I could not hear the question.
Yeah, the bishops and the priests and even the laity in the Philippines are concerned about the moral dimension doon sa pinagmulan ng bakuna. Can you please tell us your view?
So, one of the reasons why there is a moral concern with these vaccines is that some of the vaccines, AstraZeneca, Gamaleya, and Johnson & Johnson are the top three, were developed using cells that were obtained from an abortion. So we had to discuss the moral implications of that. The Vatican came out with a statement on December 21st last year to explain why using these morally controversial vaccines is still fine during a global pandemic. And so I had to explain to the bishops why that is the case, and so that they could understand it better.
I see. Okay. So, ano po iyon? Ano ang pwede nating masabi? For the meantime na may pandemya, pwedeng gamitin ito. We're not justifying it, but there is this necessity, right?
No, it's not just that, actually. So the example I gave to the bishops is that the roads of Rome were built by slaves 2,000 years ago. So if we walk on the roads of Rome today, are we in fact promoting slavery? No, we're not, because it happened so long ago that it is morally distant from us walking in Rome. So the abortion happened in 1972. It happened in the Netherlands, so it's historical. As long as our walking on the streets of Rome do not promote future slavery, in the same way our using of these vaccines, as long as they do not promote a future abortion, are legitimate because of the moral distance we have from them. I hope the example will help you to understand the moral thinking that is taking place, especially since people do not realize that these fetal cell lines, the cell lines that are morally controversial, have also been used to make many cancer therapies. They have also been used, to, as I understand them, for drugs involved in mental health. And so the reason why we say it's okay to use these drugs is because the abortion was 50 years ago and morally distant, and are using these drugs and are using these vaccines does not mean that we embrace or promote or condone abortion. And we must remember that abortion remains gravely immoral, gravely evil, because it was the death of an innocent girl. And yet God is able to bring good out of evil.
I see. Now, my next question is it morally acceptable for people in power to use the vaccines for political gain?
Well, I mean, what do you mean exactly by that?
Eh baka magamit daw sa politika. Mag-i-eleksyon na.
Yeah. So, the vaccines have to be used to end the pandemic, to protect the Filipino people. We have to do this as efficiently and as quickly as possible to save Filipino lives and to save Filipino livelihoods. If the politicians delay the use of these vaccines for political reasons, then they are betraying the trust that the public has given to them to protect the common good. So, so in terms of politics, for me, is what is most important is that we most efficiently and most quickly deploy these vaccines to save Filipinos and to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And any delay for political reasons would be unjust, because people will die, people will get sick if we delay.
Okay. So, pwede nang tanggapin na yung bakuna may mukha ng politiko.
I do not know how to answer that question.
Father, looking forward, what can we hope for in the coming months? Because they say yung first half of the year will be the same. Meron ka pang GCQ, may MGCQ, meron ka pang paghuhugas ng kamay, pagmamaskara, paggamit ng face shields, at iba pa. Let's look forward. Are you optimistic we can get the vaccines and we'll get more people vaccinated?
So, the national government has announced that when the vaccines arrive, they will focus on the metropolitan area. So they will focus on Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, and Metro Davao. And so depending upon how these vaccines will be deployed, the hope is that we will be able to severely undermine the pandemic in these 3 urban areas. And if we can do that, then we can strangle the pandemic in the Philippines. Because, most of the provinces are actually quite good at controlling their pandemic. But every time they control their pandemic, someone from Manila flies in or arrives and it starts again. So,
And that's it.
And that's how it happens. So if we can cut the head of the snake off by smothering the pandemic in these 3 cities, then I think even though we are not able to vaccinate the entire country, it will dramatically improve pandemic control around the country because the main sources of the virus have been destroyed.
Okay. Ano pong mensahe ninyo sa ating mga kababayan, sa ating mga manonood, sa mga kapatid sa media at sa balan?
The only way to end this pandemic, the only way to prevent more ECQs, is we must vaccinate every single person. And people will be scared, people will be angry, people will be disappointed. But together we must vaccinate in order to protect our lolos and our lolas and senior citizens who are most at risk. And I want Christmas back. So if we vaccinate, we might be able by Christmas to return Pasko to the way it was before. So, we should vaccinate this year. We will be vaccinating all year in order to celebrate Pasko again in the way it should be celebrated, with no masks, with no social distancing. But the only way we would be able to celebrate Pasko this year without masks and without social distancing is if we as a people, as a country, together decide that we must all be vaccinated when the vaccines begin to arrive in our beloved country.
Father, I'm sure we will touch base with you again once you get to Manila, and probably you can update us on your research, and then I'll get my colleagues from the media to sit with you and get the updates on your views and everything. Thank you very much, Father. I know it's getting late.
Thank you. It's time for me to say the Holy Mass.
Oh, really? Maraming salamat po.
God bless you back home in the Philippines.
See you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Ito ang Oragon Internet Television. Maaasahan sa Balance News in Public Affairs, Education, Music and Information gamit ang makabagong teknolohiya sa pamamahayag. Maaasahan sa katotohanan, kaagapay ng mamamayan sa pagkikipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude another day of broadcasting activities. You have been watching to this virtual broadcast station, Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting, a commercial non-stop virtual broadcast station through Facebook and YouTube. Registered with business name number 1909782 by the Department of Trade and Industry, and authorizing to operate until July 2, 2025. Oragon Internet Television Broadcasting is now signing off.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, ay mas nasilanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y bumay, upang bihirang, kuya ka ng magiliw.